Okay, I just want to say that I apologize for not posting a video on Thursday. I had completely spaced that it was indeed Thursday, and I didn't realize it until I was driving to work that Thursday means that I have to post a Book Fighters video. And I meant to post one after work, but then I didn't get off until 2 in the morning, and I was just so tired of talking at that point that I just couldn't do it. But I'm here now to talk about books with all of you, so hopefully that's alright. So last week I read Little Red Riding Hood, Miss the Bus, and this is a book of poetry. I was just in a poetry mood. I needed some poetry inside of me. It had been a long time since I'd read any poetry, and I'm kind of in that zone again. You know, poetry kind of comes and goes for me. I don't know if anyone else feels this, but sometimes I'm really in it, and other times I just can't bear to read another freaking poem. But I wanted to read some poetry, so I read Little Red Riding Hood, Miss the Bus. And this was a book that was actually assigned to me in school, in college, for one of my classes. And I do not remember having read it, but apparently I did, because there are pages with annotations on them and my handwriting and my marking, so I guess I did read at least the first half of it at some point, but I don't remember doing that. So, how did I like this book? Well, it was pretty good. I liked it. I have some major issues with Sabito Press, which is the book that published this book of poems. It is the university press at the University of Colorado in Boulder, which is the school that I attended, and I have some major issues with it. I have issues with their entire creative writing program, because I think they have one style that they promote, and that's it, and nothing else is even worth reading in their opinion. And you get into classes and they want to sort of force you into this one style of reading that is very language heavy. It's completely focused on the language at the expense of many other aspects of poetry. They're very anti-slam poetry. They're not so big on the classics. I mean, they respect them, but they don't teach them. I just don't like it. I don't like Sabito Press at all. And so we would go to class and we would have to study the books that were released by the university press, by students that had attended the university, and have this one style, this one voice. And I don't think that that is what poetry is about. I think that if only one style of poetry is acceptable to you, then you're doing poetry wrong. And I think that you also isolate a lot of people from the poetry world when you do that. I think a lot of people hate poetry because of the way they've been taught it, because they've been told that this type of poetry is good and everything else doesn't count. And that's why people say they hate poetry. That's why nobody reads poetry anymore. And they're shooting themselves in the foot, because they publish the people that sound like them, but anyone else is not acceptable. So they don't appeal to a readership, and they don't accept differing viewpoints. And it's just a bad situation, and it's why poetry doesn't sell, why poetry is not read, why most people say they hate poetry, and they don't hate poetry. They could like poetry, but because of the way they've been taught it, and because of the way the world of poetry works right now, everybody hates it. And I think that's reasonable, considering the world of poetry now. And I don't think that it has to be that way. But that was kind of a rant that was not very related to this book. This book was pretty okay. It was definitely in the Sabito Press style that was very focused on the language and not very focused on anything else. It didn't really get my blood pumping like Crush by Richard Sykin did, or any other poetry that I like, but it was good. It was good. There were lines in it that I really liked. The imagery was pretty nice. I liked it as sort of a take on Little Red Riding Hood, but not really. It was worth a read, and it won't take you long to get through it. If you like poetry already, it's one that I would recommend. If you don't like poetry and you're looking for a starter book, it's not one that I would recommend. So yeah, that's all I have to say about this one. It was alright. I already like poetry, so it didn't influence me in any major way. It did sort of get my poetry brain going again. I've been writing a little bit more this week and those sorts of things. But it was not amazing. It's not one that I would say that anybody has to read. Questions. So I missed some questions when I wasn't posting. The first one was from Dan about whether we had ever imagined a character wrongly and then found out later. And I have. It's happened multiple times, but the one time that I can really remember is when I was reading the Twilight books. I mixed up somehow the description of Alice and the other one, Rosalie, maybe? I don't know. Whatever. I mixed up their two descriptions. So when I was reading through the Twilight books, I was picturing Alice as sort of a halfway in between the descriptions of Rosalie and Alice. So she was this tiny little blonde girl, and I had sort of like a dark-haired, dark-featured impression of Rosalie. And even when I read the books now, that's what I think of when I read it. And it's not like it really matters. Like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the author intended the person to look like, because what they look like, generally speaking, has nothing to do with their position in the plot. I don't think I've ever misimagined it so much that I've gotten, like, the age and gender and everything else completely opposite of what they were, but I have definitely misimagined the way that they look. But I don't think that matters so much. I mean, at a certain point, all that matters is how you read it and what you took out of it. And Julia asked a sneaky little question about the journalism aspect of this channel, and if we're journalism and those sorts of things. I would say that there are times when we are journalism, and there are times when we are not. I think that it's hard to define new media in the same way that we've defined things before. So it's hard to say this is journalism and that is blogging, or this is personal and that is business, because it kind of all meshes together now. And I don't think that's a problem. I think that maybe, like, for the first half of our videos, we do a certain amount of journalism, and for the second half of it, we do some social networking, what with the questions and the social aspect of what we're doing. And I don't think we should have to define it in those terms. I think we've come to the point where we're redefining genres and we're redefining how things are done, because we have the technology that's changed and it's a different scope. It's a different scope. And I kind of think that the way that we talk about books is a little bit more accessible than traditional book review styles. I mean, that's helpful to a certain extent. When you are looking for a book to read and you want to see what other people think of it, you go through the reviews and see how many people liked it, how many didn't, and why. But I don't think that really matters anymore. If people are looking to hear about books and hear about experiences with books, I think that our way of doing it is more accessible than the traditional critical style, especially with general book journalism. They look for things to criticize. They want to criticize something in the book. And so they pick out things to talk about. Even if the book were as perfect as a book could be, a book reviewer could find something to criticize about it, because that's their job, is to criticize the books. Whereas in this space, we can say, this book was amazing. This was the best thing I've ever read. Everybody needs to read it. Stop whatever you're doing and read this book, because it was as close to perfect as literature can get. And we can say that here because we're not boxed in by these sort of traditional book review journalism styles. And so, would I call what we're doing journalism? Maybe not in the traditional sense, but functionally, I would say that yes, we are journalism. And I think we do have a place, and I think we deserve a place at the table to be taken seriously, even though what we're doing isn't necessarily serious all the time. So, I hope that answered your question, and I don't think there were any other questions. I don't have a question for you guys this week because it's late and I haven't thought of one, but I'll bring you one on Thursday when I post my next video. And of course, this week I could only be reading The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, because it is the Vlogbrothers, Nerdfighters, Blurbing Book Club book. That's all I got. All right, Dan, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.